Welcome to Newsmax TV. I'm Kathleen Walter. Political pressure on the Obama administration is mounting and a political firestorm is brewing after Israeli Marines stormed a Gaza-bound flotilla in a confrontation that killed 9 people. Joining us from Atlanta to discuss is George Birnbaum, an international political consultant and former chief of staff to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Welcome to Newsmax TV, Mr. Birnbaum.
Good to be here with you today.
Israel has received global condemnation as a result of the violence, as has Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. You advised him in the past as his chief of staff. Do you approve of how he's handling this?
I think so. Without question, I approve of the way he's handled it and the way the Israeli government handled it. I mean, we have to understand what happened from the beginning. This was a flotilla, part of which was sponsored by well-known global terrorist organizations with connections to Al-Qaeda, trying to run a blockade that no one has said in the past is an illegal blockade. In fact, a needed and legal blockade participated in with the Egyptian government. Given the fact that some of these organizations were sponsoring these ships, there was absolute probable cause to assume the possibility of arms being smuggled on these boats with or without the knowledge of the activists on board. And Israel had the right to intercept these boats and try and understand what was on the boats, because they were given the chance to come to the port of Ashdod, have the cargo inspected, and if in fact it was only humanitarian aid, would be allowed to continue with that humanitarian aid onto Gaza. They refused. So the Israeli government did what it had to do to protect its citizens. So
Israel is saying that this was an act of self-defense and that use of force was justified. Do you agree that that use of force was justified? And how do you respond to those who say that it was excessive?
There were six ships boarded that same evening. 5 of those ships were boarded without incident. 6, the Marmara, in which this incident took place, had people on board who are now known to have been hired mercenaries. The commandos that boarded the ship in the initial wave were armed with nothing but paintball guns. They were expecting to meet nothing but peace activists, as they did on the 5 other ships. They were brutally attacked with metal iron rods, with knives. Guns were taken, fired at them. So the second wave of soldiers that came in to protect their own comrades, and in self-defense did what they had to do.
Now, have you been contacted by the Prime Minister's office for guidance in getting through this?
I have not. I have been in contact with the Foreign Minister's office, but not the Prime Minister's office.
What advice are you giving?
Well, listen, the Prime Minister gave a wonderful speech yesterday in which he basically outlined the fact that there's a constant historical hypocrisy here, in that everyone says Israel has the right to defend itself, and yet when they go to defend themselves, they're criticized internationally. And I think he laid out in good course the probable cause as to why these ships had to be stopped and inspected. So the message coming out of Israel in terms of why they did it, the video imagery that's coming out from not only the Israeli government, but from the videos taken by the people on the ship, is proving the fact that what Israel did was the right thing to do and what they had to do.
The U.S. now finds itself in an awkward diplomatic position. The UN Security Council has called for an impartial investigation, which the U.S. supports, but the Obama administration has neither condemned nor embraced Israel's actions. Vice President Biden has come out saying that Israel at least had the right to inspect the cargo on board that ship. What is the U.S. trying to achieve here?
Well, the U.S. is in a very tenuous position. I think Vice President Biden's comments yesterday were absolutely on the mark. I'm glad that he, as a representative of the administration, said that Israel had a right to defend itself. I will say that the Obama administration's problem is that if they do anything at this point that seems to the Israeli government to be placating the Arab world, whether it's Cairo or Ankara or Tehran, that'll be a signal to the Israeli government that they cannot trust the Americans vis-a-vis other issues, more important issues like the nuclear arming of Iran. It may force the Israelis to take quicker unilateral action than they would like. So the Obama administration has to be very clear here. They have to be supportive of Israel. If they were not, Israel is going to lose faith in the U.S. administration and end up having to take on these vital, critical, dangerous issues on their own.
Now, being in this position, what does it do for the U.S. relationship with Turkey, which is a secular Muslim state?
Well, listen, I think the Turkish government is also playing both sides here. The Turkish government raided the offices of this organization, the Humanitarian Relief Fund, known in Arabic as the Insani Yardim Vakfi. They investigated their offices several years ago. They found in their offices weapons, diagrams of how to make IEDs, plans for jihad in places like Afghanistan and Israel. So the Turkish government knows who's behind this. The Turkish government is also in a difficult position. This is a government that has a lot of pressure from Islamic groups and organizations within its own country. They cannot be seen as being too pro-Western or certainly too pro-Israel. So they're also playing kind of a public relations game here and outwardly looking as if they're standing against Israel and certainly positioning vis-a-vis the United States. I think at the end of the day, there are too many strategic relationships and alliances that are between both Turkey and the United States and Turkey and Israel that this relationship is really in danger of deteriorating.
If the UN attempts to punish Israel, what should President Obama do?
You know, the UN resolution that came out the other day, it was so tame compared to other castigations that have been issued by the United Nations towards Israel. I have a feeling that given the nature of the language of this recent resolution, not much will come of it. I think the Israelis should absolutely take the Obama administration's call for an independent investigation or an investigation led by Israel with U.S. observers. The facts in the case will clearly say that Israel did the right thing. And I think most people in the UN, having seen the footage after the initial reaction, understand that that's the case. I'm really not sure this is going to go too far through the United Nations.
Okay. Now, the UN says it wants an impartial investigation, but do you think that it is hard to find impartial judges of Israel these days?
It's very difficult. I mean, don't forget, this is an organization that had Libya heading up their human rights organization within the United Nations. I'm not sure the United Nations could ever be an impartial juror of Israel. I think Israel would absolutely welcome an Israeli investigation where international observers took part in that investigation to ensure that Israel was doing everything it could do to get to the bottom of the facts.
Do you think President Obama's Mideast strategy is beginning to implode?
You know, I do. I think from the beginning the strategy was incorrect. One of the first things I learned over 10 years ago when I went to work for Mr. Netanyahu is the notion of how you negotiate in the Middle East. And you have to negotiate in order to obtain success in negotiations from a position of pride, from a position of strength. When President Obama was elected, one of his first actions as president was to go to Cairo and give a speech where he basically apologized to the Islamic world for the actions of the United States. In the Middle East, when you apologize, that's a sign of weakness. It's a sign of oh, we got someone who we can really negotiate against. And so from the beginning, I think Obama made a mistake. He made a misstep. Because in the Arab world right now, they see America as being weak, not as being strong. So that is starting to unravel. You have to take a position. You have to stand strong. You have to seem that you are willing to go toe-to-toe in order to have the positive outcome of any negotiation in the culture of the Middle East. That's something the Obama administration has not done from the beginning and needs to start doing very quickly if they want any successes in the Middle East.
The White House is trying to wrest concessions from Benjamin Netanyahu in Middle East peace talks. What can we expect from him?
Well, I think the position of the State of Israel has been clear all along. And the first thing that needs to happen is for the Arab world and the people who, in fact, we're negotiating peace with, mainly the Palestinian Authority, have to say Israel has a right to exist. Once that happens, I think a lot can continue in the way of peace talks. In fact, there's been incredible cooperation between the Palestinian Authority and the Israeli authorities in fighting terror. In the West Bank, you see an unbelievable effort made by Mahmoud Abbas and the Palestinian Authority to stop terrorism. The problem is you have a bifurcated situation between the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank and Hamas in Gaza. So any kind of peace talks really can only take place right now with one of those sides. Hamas being a terrorist organization in no way can be a partner for peace, especially that, as they've stated over and over again, they want to see the destruction of Israel as part of their policy. So in terms of concessions, I think you'll see concessions made by the Israeli government with regard to settlements, with regard to land swaps, with regard to security easing in terms of checkpoints, but only with regard to the West Bank and Mahmoud Abbas. Certainly Gaza is another situation.
Last question real quickly, George. The U.S. has pressured Israel to allow into Gaza some aid in the past. Michael Oren, the Israeli ambassador to Washington, said that lifting the blockade is out of the question. We know that Israel wants to cut off Hamas, but there are claims that the blockade hurts innocents. What evidence is there that the blockade is working and achieving the desired result?
Well, the fact of the matter is that the blockade does keep out weapons, and the humanitarian aid does on a daily basis, to the tune of some 10,000 pounds of humanitarian aid, flow into Gaza every single day. There's no critical shortage of food, critical shortage of water. Basic needs are all being met at the humanitarian level in Gaza. The only way to control the flow of weapons is a blockade, both by the Israelis and by the Egyptians. We cannot, as the Prime Minister said yesterday, allow the port in Gaza to become a port for Iran, to smuggle weapons, not just small missiles, but weapons of mass destruction into Gaza. So the blockade is the only way to make sure that anything flowing into Gaza certainly is only humanitarian and not to be used in terms of terrorism or war against the people of Israel.
All right, George Birnbaum, thanks so much for joining us on Newsmax TV and sharing with us your thoughts and insights.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for watching Newsmax TV.